To South Korea next, where months of political turmoil have culminated in the removal of the embattled President Yoon Suk Yeol. The country's top court has voted to dismiss the impeached leader, clearing the way for fresh elections.
The respondent, President Yoon Suk Yeol, is dismissed.
After months of political turmoil, South Korea's constitutional court unanimously voted to uphold President Yoon's impeachment. The court said that his decision on December 3, 2024 to impose martial law seriously violated the constitution. Yoon sent armed troops to the parliament, claiming he was safeguarding constitutional order against opposition forces who wanted to throw it into chaos. But parliamentarians were able to force their way into the building and overturn the decree. They voted to impeach him less than 2 weeks later. Anti-Yoon protesters in Seoul were overjoyed by his removal from power.
I watched the ruling as it was broadcast live at this rally, and I'm so happy and overwhelmed. I think it's a victory for democracy and for the people who came out to the streets to protest on weekends. I believe the dismissal of Yoon Suk Yeol will be the first step of a major social reform.
But for Yoon's supporters, who maintain that his impeachment was politically motivated, it was a bitter blow.
I can never accept this. This is not a proper country. I think this country is going down. Is this a proper country? I'm spitting blood.
Yoon released a statement after the verdict, saying he was sorry he was unable to meet his supporters' expectations. According to the Constitution, an election must now be held within 60 days to find a new president.
In support of the will of the sovereign people, we will do our best to manage the next presidential election so that the next government can be created without disruption in accordance with the Constitution and laws.
South Korea's next government faces the challenge of uniting a country still deeply split by Yoon's removal from office.
Journalist Jen Moon is following events from the South Korean capital for us. Jen, good to see you. Now, the country goes into snap elections highly polarized. How is this likely to play out, and how do you expect the divide over Yoon's fate to play into the campaign?
Well, this is one of the most emotionally charged moments South Korea has faced since the democratization in the late 1980s. The court's ruling to remove President Yoon was unanimous, but public opinion couldn't be more divided. For many, this was a defense of constitutional order, but for Yoon supporters, it's a political ambush. So back to your question, logistically, the election is likely to proceed smoothly. South Korea has a robust electoral institutions, but emotionally, we're walking a very tight rope. If the results are close, or if any candidate tries to delegitimize the outcome, we would see that polarization spill back into the streets, and there's a real risk of a post-election legitimacy crisis.
Let's talk about what that crisis or not crisis could look like. This new government that is coming to South Korea after a campaign that is yet to start will be tasked with halting a long cycle of political blockades as well, and an unwillingness to compromise that we've seen for long in the country. Is there any hope of reconciliation after this, and what might that look like?
Well, there is hope, but it's very conditional, and it depends heavily on the on leadership. Right now, opposition leader Lee Jae-myung is a front runner, but it's important to note that he himself comes with his own political baggage, including ongoing legal investigations related to corruption and abuse of power. So while many see him as a figure capable of restoring democratic order, he's also a polarizing figure in his own right. So if Yi wins, he'll have a clear mandate from those who opposed Yoon's authoritarian overreach, but he'll still need to govern for the entire country. And that means reaching beyond his base, maybe even bringing in moderates or technocrats, and sending a signal that this won't just be a partisan reset. A new administration that prioritizes institutional reform and national healing could begin to turn the page. But if the political tone remains combative, and if the winner governs only for their side, then South Korea risks entrenching this cycle of mutual distrust and gridlock even further.
Now, Yoon has been stripped of all his powers and privileges. Briefly, maybe, what happens to him now?
Well, Yoon's fault is complete and unprecedented in its scope. He no longer has the right to a pension, staff, or official residence. But the legal consequences are far more serious. He's already been indicted for rebellion over his brief imposition of martial law, a charge that can carry a life sentence or even the death penalty, though South Korea hasn't executed anyone since the late 1990s. Now that Yoon is a private citizen again, he no longer has any immunity. So prosecutors are free to pursue additional charges, including abuse of power and constitutional violations. Several of his former military and police officials have already been arrested. That said, he still has a loyal following. He may try to influence the Conservative Party's nominee in the upcoming election, and some of his allies are already calling for his reinstatement or eventual pardon. But legally and politically speaking, Yoon's presidency is over, and what remains is whether his legal fate becomes a symbol of accountability or another source of political division.
Thanks very much for those insights. That was Jen Moon in Seoul.